India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan are all on the brink of war. Already in 2025, these three nations have been at each other's throats. India and Pakistan fought a brief but very intense conflict in May of this year, and this October, Pakistan and Afghanistan's Taliban rulers exchanged bombs, bullets, and blood across their shared border. Wind the clock back by a few weeks, and 2025 was already going to be remembered as a year of rising violence, direct confrontations, and rewritten regional rules that made open conflict more likely in the future. But now, in light of the most recent events to rock South Asia, it appears that the worst fighting of 2025 is still yet to come. Over the last several days, bombings rocked the capital cities of New Delhi and Islamabad. India uncovered what it claims was an elaborate terror plot to kill thousands. Pakistan has declared Afghanistan to be launching attacks despite the two nations' fragile and now discarded ceasefire. And at a moment when Pakistan's leader is amassing power at an incredible pace, he has declared his nation to be in a state of war. Troops are moving toward border zones, the entire region is on high alert, and global powers are already picking sides. In this corner of the world, a return to war was already an eventuality, but now that war appears to be imminent. Even if this week's bombings were a coincidence, that doesn't mean they'll be treated like one. Back-to-back, on 2 consecutive days, earlier this week, the Indian city of Delhi, home to the nation's capital, New Delhi, and the Pakistani capital city of Islamabad were rocked by deadly explosions, separated by hardly more than 24 hours. India was the nation struck first when a car bomb exploded in a bustling part of Delhi's Old Town on Monday. The death toll was first announced at 8, but it's climbed to 12 at the time of writing. Over 30 other people were injured in an incident that India is investigating as an act of terror. Then, on Tuesday, a suicide bomber blew himself up outside an Islamabad district court. In this attack too, the death toll currently stands at 12, with just shy of 30 people being injured. The organization known as Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, better known as the Pakistani Taliban, claimed credit for the blast. Now look, before we dig into the implications of either of these attacks, we've got to be very clear. As of the time of writing, in the late evening on Thursday, the 13th of November, local time in New Delhi and Islamabad, these two attacks have not been conclusively linked. In fact, at least right now, there's not a clear reason to believe that they will be. But these twin acts of terror don't necessarily have to be perpetrated by the same bad actor in order to be the thing that draws India and Pakistan into a renewed conflict. And to understand why, let's start with the attack that happened first. The explosion in India took place at a historic site known as the Red Fort, in a part of Delhi that's always supposed to be under tight security. The attack relied on a car bomb, and although a link hasn't yet been conclusively proven, investigators in India are working to chase down links between the driver and a terror cell that had been identified and dismantled by national law enforcement across the prior several days. According to Indian outlets, the arrest started on the 7th of November in the western coastal state of Gujarat, near the Pakistani border, where a doctor with a medical degree from China, Ahmed Saeed, was arrested along with 2 alleged handlers. As reports by law enforcement allege, Saeed was manufacturing ricin, a naturally occurring and very deadly poison that's been used in global terror plots and as a chemical agent by a range of militaries. The 3 men were also in possession of handguns and had allegedly carried out reconnaissance in several Indian cities, including Delhi. One of the other men arrested reportedly has links to the Islamic State's Khorasan branch. As the plot unraveled, Indian authorities were reportedly led to another terror cell in the district of Pulwama in the disputed region of Kashmir. There, investigators carried out a raid and detained at least 7 more people who allegedly had in their possession about 2,900 kilograms of explosive material at about 6,400 pounds, along with detonators and firearms. 2 more doctors were arrested as part of the plot. Indian investigators are now suggesting that the driver of the car that exploded in Delhi may have been part of the same cell or a larger network and had reacted in a panicked attempt to carry out an attack while he still could. In fact, it's an open question whether the car bomb was supposed to explode at the moment it did, given that the vehicle was still in motion when it detonated and the driver was still inside. Regardless, Indian investigators revealed one other critical detail about the terror cells they disrupted. According to national law enforcement, they were all connected to Jaish-e-Mohammed, a very active, very deadly terror organization operating across the Kashmir region that India has long accused Pakistani intelligence of supporting directly. While Jaish-e-Mohammed was not the group responsible for the major Kashmir terror attack earlier this year, the one that led to Pakistan and India's 5-day conflict, India considers Jaish-e-Mohammed to be a part of the same larger terror network coordinated by Pakistan. And speaking of Pakistan, the nation's leaders face a similar situation after the attack they sustained this week, the explosion in Islamabad that killed 12 people outside a district court. As we mentioned, that attack has already been claimed by the Pakistani Taliban, a large and well-equipped terror group that's carried out or attempted dozens of attacks in Pakistan in 2025 alone. Like the attack in India, the bombing in Islamabad was not an isolated incident. In fact, it came only a day after a group of Pakistani Taliban fighters, including a suicide bomber, had attempted to storm a military school in the city of Warna. The day earlier, on Sunday, Pakistan had conducted a series of raids against Pakistani Taliban hideouts dotting the border with Afghanistan, where Pakistan reported the killings of 20 insurgents in total. The violence came just a short couple of days after Pakistan's diplomatic relationship with Afghanistan deteriorated sharply. Over the weekend, a third round of peace talks between Islamabad and Kabul had collapsed as mediator nations like Turkey and Qatar tried and failed to get the two nations to come to terms over their deadly recent border clashes. Similar to how India blames Pakistan for supporting Jaish-e-Mohammed, Pakistan blames Afghanistan and its own Afghan Taliban rulers for harboring the Pakistani Taliban on their soil and facilitating the group's terror operations. Afghanistan denies those allegations, but at the very least, it's impossible to ignore the fact that the Pakistani Taliban does operate quite comfortably on Afghan territory, and international conflict experts suggest that the two may have substantially deeper links. On a prior occasion, when the peace talks between Pakistan and Afghanistan had fallen through a couple of weeks ago, Pakistan had responded with fire and brimstone. The nation's defense minister, Khawaj Asif, had gone on to threaten Afghanistan on social media, quoting him, "Pakistan does not require to employ even a fraction of its full arsenal to completely obliterate the Taliban regime and push them back into the caves for hiding." This time, in the immediate aftermath of the breakdown, Pakistan's leaders had taken a far more conciliatory tone, but now that's changed. That same defense minister told his nation after the Islamabad attack, quote, "Anyone who thinks that the Pakistan army is fighting this war in the Afghan-Pakistan border region and the remote areas of Balochistan should take today's suicide attack at the Islamabad district courts as a wake-up call. This is a war for all of Pakistan." In the wake of the Islamabad attack, as we mentioned, a group aligned with the Pakistani Taliban claimed credit for the attack, although the organization's highest leadership attempted to deny a direct link. On social media, however, Pakistan's Prime Minister made another allegation. Not just that Afghanistan had harbored the perpetrators, but that India was ultimately behind the attack. In both India and Pakistan, this week's attacks shattered the veneer of safety that their respective governments and the general public had previously enjoyed. In Pakistan, sure, parts of the country's northwest were under threat from the Pakistani Taliban, and in other places like Balochistan province, there were other violent terror organizations that might seek to harm people. But Islamabad was supposed to be entirely safe. Similarly, in India, perhaps there might be attacks in the Kashmir region or by other rebel groups in the country's east, but for a car bombing to succeed in Delhi in 2025 was supposed to be unthinkable. Now that sense of stability has been shattered on both sides, and when India and Pakistan respond by pointing the finger at each other, that is hardly an accident. Despite the destruction of their conflict earlier this year, both India and Pakistan's leaders would seem to have reason to believe that they could gain from a return to fighting. In India, the rationale is fairly straightforward. The exchange this past May delivered New Delhi a black eye, with Pakistan showing parity or even seeming to get the upper hand before America swooped in and claimed credit for brokering a ceasefire, embarrassing a nation in India that's long taken pride in its ability to handle Pakistan by itself. They've also got to answer what appears to be a very elaborate terror plot, and one that India would claim was probably orchestrated by Pakistan. In Pakistan, the situation's a bit more complicated. Islamabad was actually quite pleased with the way that its prior confrontation with India went down, claiming credit for the shoot-down of several French-made advanced combat jets and using its achievements in order to justify stronger nationalist rhetoric against New Delhi. The leader of Pakistan's army, Asim Munir, is the real ruler of the nation behind the scenes, and also this week he was granted lifelong immunity and a serious expansion of his powers, and we imagine that it's not particularly difficult to see why the leader of Pakistan's military would stand to gain from escalating a conflict with a nation he believes he can beat. Internationally, too, the situation seems to be shifting in Pakistan's favor. Islamabad has enjoyed a growing relationship with the United States under Donald Trump, while it's also gotten much closer to China, especially now that China realizes Pakistan can serve as a real-world testing ground for Chinese military hardware. Russia and Iran have each appeared to signal their tacit support for Pakistan if it were to take future military action, not promising to assist directly, but making it clear that Pakistan wouldn't face much, if any, diplomatic resistance. India, by contrast, is relatively isolated right now, with its US ties weakening, China regarding it as an emergent rival to keep in check, and India's own long-held policy of strategic non-alignment potentially coming back to bite it in a moment when Pakistan appears to be on the rise. Not only that, but if India does go looking for allies in this moment, it's going to find itself saddled with Taliban-ruled Afghanistan, where India has recently worked to rebuild ties after the Taliban takeover, but where Kabul would be much more of a liability, both diplomatically and militarily, than an asset. Making matters worse for India, Pakistan has been working to tie New Delhi and Kabul closer together, with Pakistan now publicly claiming that Afghanistan itself is an India-sponsored regime. The nation in all of this that almost certainly wants to avoid a war right now is Afghanistan itself. The nation lacks any level of military parity with its neighbors, and its Taliban leaders knew that even before what appeared to be a stark reminder last month from Pakistan. Whereas Pakistan leverages world-class fighter aircraft, hundreds of advanced main battle tanks, and thousands of artillery pieces, Afghanistan has little more than foot soldiers with AK-47s and heavy equipment that might as well have been pulled from a museum. But Afghanistan is also the most likely nation to be drawn into the conflict against its will by a network of terror organizations that have little reason to respect Afghanistan's preferences. And let's be really charitable for a moment toward the Afghan Taliban and accept the premise that they aren't directing the Pakistani Taliban, or if we want to be especially kind, we can even presume that Afghanistan is calling for restraint. Afghanistan's reason for making that choice would be a matter of self-preservation, since a war with Pakistan isn't a question of who will win, but a question of how badly Kabul will get its ass kicked. But the Pakistani Taliban's goal isn't to stop Kabul from getting its ass kicked. The Pakistani Taliban's goal is to inflict harm upon Pakistan, however that happens, and right now, the organization has a hell of an opportunity. The Pakistani Taliban knows the future terror attacks inside Pakistan will be interpreted as hostile acts by India, and the more sensitive the target they hit, the more severe Pakistan's response will be. The Pakistani Taliban knows that India can inflict more damage on Pakistan, even in a contested war, than their own asymmetric insurgency ever could. They know that they can attack Pakistan with impunity, basing their operations on Afghan soil and exploiting a porous border that Afghanistan cannot control, and they know that Pakistan has already built the justification to interpret a terror attack supposedly enabled by Afghanistan as a terror attack that was sponsored by India. The Pakistani Taliban's objective isn't to avoid a regional conflict, their objective is to accelerate it, because for the price of a few suicide bombers and a few 100 kilograms of explosives, they can get the governments of India and Afghanistan engaged militarily, with Pakistan in the way that an insurgency could never achieve. Their success, or their failure, in that effort rests on Afghanistan's ability to stop them, and right now, that's not something that Afghanistan is capable of. After this week's 2 bombings in India and Pakistan, the situation in South Asia was obviously bad. But the longer you look, the worse everything gets. India and Pakistan may not be desperate to fight a war, but they're both very open to the possibility, especially Pakistan. The border between Pakistan and Afghanistan is a conflict zone just waiting to go hot again, governed by a truce that collapsed before it could even be negotiated. The entire region is a ticking time bomb right now, and who holds the detonator? It's not Pakistan. It's not India, and it's not Afghanistan. It's a loosely connected network of extremist, accelerationist terror organizations across India, Pakistan, and the disputed Kashmir region, often taking harbor on disputed or Afghan soil with a keen awareness of what they might achieve by pushing that big red button. International experts on India and Pakistan have emphasized that war isn't necessarily inevitable and that both nations have real incentives to back down. But although that's true, the problem runs even deeper. Even if none of these nations would choose by themselves to start a war in the coming weeks, that choice could be taken out of their hands at a moment when India and Pakistan would each accept the outbreak of war and Afghanistan would be forced to live with it. Thank you for watching.